Bonjour, ça va? Ah, très bien, merci! Yes, today's video is a French classic. I want to show you how to make Fougasse. So Fougasse is a super traditional classic French half bread, kind of their equivalent of the Italian focaccia, but rather than being laced with olive oil and all soft and fluffy, this is a much crispier affair, crunchy on the outside, soft and fluffy on the inside, and you can flavour it with all manner of things. Traditionally it's flavoured with lardon, so little fried bacon pieces, but you could use sun-dried tomatoes, olives, cheese. Have a little play, but today we're going to be using herbs. As far as the process goes of making it, my previous video, which showed you how to bake with a poolish, that would be ideal. Just use the quantities I give you today, but following that process. But rather than repeat that for this video, I thought I'd show you another option for ramping up the bread flavours, and that is to do a double proof. So whereas you'd normally mix your dough, let it rise, then tip it out, shape it and bake it, today we're going to actually knock it all the way back after that bulk rise and let it do it all over again, and that extra time is going to increase flavour and improve the texture of your bread. So for this recipe you will need 500 grams of strong white bread flour, 5 grams of instant yeast, 10 grams of salt, 375 grams of water, and that's going to take the hydration up to 75%, which is just going to help us get that kind of artisanal, uneven, open crumb within the Fougasse, a little bit of olive oil, and then for herbs I'm using a tablespoon of chopped fresh rosemary, a few sprigs of thyme, we'll pick the leaves off of that, and then we'll finish it off with a little sprinkle of dried oregano. So into the mixer we will add our flour, our instant yeast, our salt, all of our water, and then a little drizzle of olive oil, about a tablespoon. So that's for the flavour and the texture. And now we'll mix that, as always, for about 5 minutes until it's looking well homogenised and is coming away from the sides of the bowl. Okay, so that's come together, looking nice and smooth. So now's a good time to add our herbs. So we'll add our tablespoon of chopped rosemary, in that goes. So same thing if you were using olives or sun-dried tomatoes, anything like that, if you put them in right at the start they're going to get mashed up and really just incorporated into the dough. So you want to mix your dough first and then add them so they remain whole. We'll just tear off a few thyme leaves. There we go, basically you just don't want any big stems in there. So we'll get that in. Again, that's about a tablespoon of thyme. That goes in. And now just give it a mix for another 30 seconds. There we go, so the herbs are mixed in. Now we'll just use a dough scraper to clear that off the dough hook. There we go. Take that off, then just straight down the sides, bringing the dough together into a ball in the middle, so it'll look something like that. And then, oh, there's a thyme leaf there, pop it in. Then cover it with a plate, and we're going to let that rise for about an hour. Okay, so that's been about an hour. And as we can see, the dough has risen nicely. Like I say, we're only using 500 grams of flour, so don't expect it to be doming out of the top. Now you could literally just push this back down to knock the air out, but that's not going to add any structure or strength to your dough. What I'm going to do is borrow a technique that you often see in sourdough baking, and we're going to do some stretch and folds. So to do that, you want a bowl of water to wet your hand, and that's just going to stop the dough from sticking to you too much. Now you just want to reach in down the side of the dough, pull it away from the side of the bowl, reach in, pick it up, stretch it, and then fold it over itself. And what this is going to do is sort of stretch those gluten strands and build up layers, which is going to add structure and strength to the dough. Now it's not hugely important for a bread like Fougasse because it's quite a flat loaf anyway. But if you were trying to make a cob or any freestanding loaf, you'd want good strength in your dough so it holds that shape. Also in sourdough, you'd probably only do this 4 times, sort of 1 for each 90-degree turns, because you're trying not to push out too much air. But on this occasion, we really are trying to knock it back. So I'm going to do a good 5, 6, 7, 8 turns till the dough comes together in a bit of a ball. So we can just keep going round, pulling and folding over itself. Just pull it away from the side of the bowl, and then we can see it the whole thing's released from the side of the bowl now. So you can just, that final fold, just tuck it under itself. There we go. And you'll end up with a fairly neat ball that's kind of been pushed down, and now we can put the lid back on and we'll let that rise for another hour. Okay, so that's been just over an hour. As we can see, it has risen nicely. That's over doubled in size. So we can tip this out and divide it in 2, because this is enough to make 2 Fougasse. I'm going to be using a little bit of semolina flour because it adds a nice texture to the crust. But if you haven't got that, just use some plain white flour. It'll be fine. Quite a generous amount, because this dough is going to be a little bit sticky due to that high hydration. So now, as always, get the dough out without degassing it and tearing it too much. Here it comes. There we go. And now just fold it in half and divide that in 2. So now, I'm not going to shape these into the Fougasse straight away. You could do that, stretch it out, but then you're going to find you've got like a cut edge on one of the sides, which aesthetically isn't ideal. So what we're going to do is a quick pre-shape, and then we'll leave them to rest for about 10 to 15 minutes, just so the seams can stick back together and the dough can relax into its new shape. So nothing too fancy, just fold the dough over itself a few times. We don't want to squeeze out too much of the air, but we're just going to make it into a little ball, and now it's got a nice round edge all around. Like I say, once that's relaxed, then we'll have a nice shape to work with in our final shaping. So again, stretch that one over itself. It's also going to mean that all those sticky cut sides are within the dough, and you've got that kind of skin on top, which is just going to stop it sticking to your hands too much. So there's our 2 little balls. Cover them with a tea towel and just leave them for about 10-15 minutes. Okay, so that's been about 10 minutes. It's just been enough time for the dough to relax, and that's just going to make it easier to work with and stretch it out into its final shape. So again, a little bit more of this semolina or flour onto there, and now you've sort of got 2 options. You can either shape these by hand like you would a pizza, so just stretching and kind of manipulating the dough, and that will give you probably a more sort of artisanal look, rustic, but it'll also keep the texture a bit more open inside. Your second option is to use a rolling pin to actually roll it out, but that is going to push out more air and give you a sort of tighter, more even crumb. But as long as you're gentle, it shouldn't make too much of a difference. So I'm going to try and do this one by hand. If we just stretch it out a bit to get it going, and then it's really just a case of holding it with one hand and pulling it with the other until you've got to a fairly flat, even shape. So you want to kind of pull it into a leaf shape. So if you've got one end that sort of naturally is pointing up higher than the other, make that the top, and then at the bottom hold it like that, and you can just let it stretch, and you'll end up with a leaf slightly triangular shape. Now you don't want to stretch out to the full size of the baking sheet, because we're going to slash it and then stretch it a bit further to open up the holes. So that should be fine. This one, we will use the rolling pin. So just like I say, gently roll it a bit, turn it, make sure it's not sticking, roll it. You can hear it deflating a bit, but that's fine. So same thing, we've got a point there, so we'll make this the bottom, so we'll just stretch that down. So now we've got our two leaf shapes. Now you want to put a little bit more flour or semolina on top, because we're going to use a dough scraper to make cuts, or you could use a pizza wheel, that works very well. So you want to basically make 2 cuts up the middle and then 3 on each side. So push the dough scraper in, and then if you move it around a bit, it'll allow some of the flour on top to fall down and make sure the sticky bits of dough get coated and don't stick back together. So we'll do another one there, and then 3 at the side. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And now you need 2 baking trays lined with a bit of baking parchment. Let's just pop that there. And now if you pick it up by the bottom, you can let it stretch, and that will allow the holes to open. Lay it down and just give it another pull. Make sure it's nice and open. That's looking pretty good. Then we'll do the same with this one. So a slash at the bottom, a slash at the top, and then 3 each side. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And again, pick it up, let it hang down, let those holes open up, lay it on the tray, stretch it out a bit, and they are ready. We'll let them proof for not too long, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour, particularly this one, which we've only sort of manipulated with our hands. We haven't squished out a lot of the air, so that one won't take long. That one, yeah, probably half an hour. Cover them with a tea towel. Get your oven preheated, and then we'll bake them. Okay, so that's been about half an hour. They've proofed up nicely. As you can see, we've got a few big blisters on them. That's really good. They're going to kind of char in the oven, so you'll get that nice dappled look. But before we put them in, we've got our rosemary and our thyme in there, but I'd just like to sprinkle a little bit of dried oregano. I find the best way to do this is, if you've got one of these spray bottles, just give the Fougasse a little squirt. That'll make the outside a bit stickier, and that'll help this grab on. Just a little sprinkle. Oregano is quite a strong flavour. Little dusting of that over the top, and then a couple more squirts just to help hydrate those little dried herbs so they don't burn in the oven. And now, because we spritz them, I also don't bother with the tray of water in the oven. There'll be enough steam on there to help the crust. So I've got the oven preheated as hot as it will go. That's 240, 250. Like I say, no tray in the oven. I'll get these in, bake them for about 15 minutes in total. So I'd leave them for the first 10 minutes, then turn the trays and swap them for the final 5 minutes so you get a nice even bake. If they're still not looking too dark, maybe give them another 3 to 5 minutes. You want them nice and crispy on the outside, but don't bake them too long, otherwise they're going to go dry like a grissini all the way through. You want them still to be light and fluffy inside. So I'm going to get them in and I will show you the results. Alright then, look at these beauties. They've come out really well. Great colour on there. Like I say, we've got the sort of charred blistered crust, which looks great. Get them onto a wire rack. You want them to cool a little bit, but you do want to eat them whilst they're still warm and nice and crunchy on the outside. If you're baking them in advance, you can refresh them in the oven. Just preheat your oven to 180 degrees and bake them for 5 to 10 minutes, and that'll make sure the crust is nice and crispy again. We'll give these a little taste. You can see we've got some big air pockets in there, a sort of nice uneven crumb, which is what you want in this. It's that kind of artisanal rustic look. Crispy but super soft on the inside. Really nice bready flavour, and then obviously you've got the flavour of the herbs, rosemary and bread, just a classic combination. That's really nice. Serve them with some drinks, dipped in some tapenade or olive oil with a bit of balsamic vinegar. Or if you want to make this into a meal, bake a camembert, serve them with it. You will have a very happy family. That's the end of this video. If you've enjoyed it, as always, give it a thumbs up. Leave your comments below. Please keep subscribing to the channel. And if you do give these ones a go, then bon chance and happy baking.